Welcome back to Real Time for the real everyday movie fan. I am, of course, your hostess with the mostest, Josh Williams, and I am joined by my friends. They're a little angry they didn't get to introduce themselves last time for the Black Widow review. So, who am I joined by today?
Ryan Murphy.
And I'm James Sheridan.
Thank you guys so much for joining me, and thank you all of you who are watching for joining us here today, because we are here to give you our spoiler-heavy discussion and review of Loki Season 1. Now, Ryan, you are the man for this job who created the show and who all started it.
Loki was created by Michael Waldron and directed by Kate Herron, and it stars Tom Hiddleston, Sophia DiMartino, Owen Wilson, and Gugu Mbatha-Raw are sort of the main stars.
Mm-hmm. And for everybody else who are wondering, who are some of the surprise, like, cameo big-time actors that were in it?
Well, the two big, well, in terms of, there's three like Lokis, the variant Lokis that he meets, but the only one whose name is really known is Richard E. Grant. He's the big special appearance. And then in terms of the character he plays, I don't know how well an actor he is known yet, but Jonathan Majors as Kang, who's not named. He's not. But we know it's Kang because he's already been announced as Kang outside the show. So
and how he described himself in the season finale.
Yeah,
you know, it's obvious. It's pretty obvious. But as you can tell, guys, this is spoiler heavy, so we probably should give you a warning before. Oops. But here's your warning now. If you have not seen Loki, come back and just join in the discussion. What were you saying, Ryan?
You did. You gave a warning.
No, that's fair. True. I kind of did, you know. But here's your complete warning now. Before we get into that discussion, guys, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you can see more of our various content in the future. Now, let's get into this Loki season finale and the show overall. Now, who did you guys initially predict was going to be the person behind the curtain, essentially? Did you guys almost think it was foregone conclusion to be Kang, or could it have been somebody else?
I would have been very surprised if it wasn't Kang. Once they revealed it wasn't the Timekeepers, it was like we were all three of us were chatting about it, and we were like, it's Kang, it's Kang, it's Kang.
I mean, from before the series, the theories were that it was going to be Kang because we knew that this series played with time and timelines and consequences of time, and who is the master of time is Kang the Conqueror, who has traveled all over the timeline and conquered different periods and whatnot. So it would make sense. Part of me kind of hoped that it would be a little something different, which it kind of was. Because technically this isn't Kang the Conqueror.
Yep.
This is a different version of the same person in the same way that Sylvie is a different version of Loki.
It's a variant.
Yeah. And more than just a variant, because the other variants of Loki were actually their names were actually Loki, whereas Sylvie is a very different person. She's an individual who's very unique, and I'd hope they get a little more into that, but I think they're saving that for season 2 because there's a lot of things about her that have been left unanswered, but that's getting too deep into the weeds.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
So it was kind of really cool to see. What was his name? Jonathan. What was his last name?
Jonathan Majors.
Majors. It was great to see him debut essentially as Kang, even though they don't necessarily say it. It's just he who remains. It'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward. There was a question I forgot to a little peek behind the curtain, guys. I usually give them questions before time so they can kind of think about their answers. But there's one I just now thought of that I'm curious what you guys might think, and we'll get into our thoughts of the show and our scores. But just real quick, do you guys think moving forward will he just be named Kang, or will it actually come out that he is Nathaniel Richards, a descendant of Reed Richards?
I think that would depend on the timing of when Fantastic Four comes out, or when we get some sort of iteration or hint at the Fantastic Four, which is entirely possible now because, again, spoilers if you haven't seen it, but why are you watching past this point? They've opened up the multiverse now.
Yeah.
The multiverse is basically confirmed.
A big old spider web.
Yeah. And one of my sort of running theories one of my running questions is, when is the Fantastic Four? Because we already know we're getting a film, but when are they going to come in? A lot of us thought it was going to happen during WandaVision because of little hints that they gave about who certain characters were supposed to be, and then it was kind of a red herring. I don't know if they intended it to be red herring, but with the multiverse now open, there is a question about, especially with a group like the Fantastic Four, who travels dimensions and travels universes. There's the possibility that we'll get them through some sort of branch within the multiverse or some sort of story told through that exploration, because we know that both Spider-Man No Way Home and at least Doctor Strange 2 are going to be, I mean, it's called Multiverse of Madness, is going to be about the multiverse, if not even more stories within there, because like very clearly we've mentioned that Kang is going to be in Quantumanium, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumanium.
Yep.
So like that's probably going to deal with that too, because I mean, how do you connect those dots and then not complete that line?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very interested in how these things are going to be brought in. So unless they actually bring in the Fantastic Four, I don't think it's going to have the resonance to bring Kang in as Nathaniel Richards without the weight of knowing who Reed Richards is. Which, I mean, the comic book fans know, but within the universe, they have to establish that first, in my opinion.
Yeah. Ryan, what do you think?
I don't know. We'll see.
Way to contribute, my friend. Way to contribute. I just thought of something very interesting in regards to the question I even, as you were talking, James, it made me just had a, what if this was the case? What if the reason we have yet to see the Fantastic Four, and maybe they won't be, you know, the first family like Ryan wants, you know, they'll eventually just show up. But what if, because now that we're at the point now where the multiverse has happened, it's happening now, you know, and what if the reason
no going back,
the Fantastic Four has yet to be established is because Kang, or if they will name him as Nathaniel Richards, took himself out of time, which prevented any other further Kangs from being established. So that means he would have had to have taken away his descendants.
Now we're just getting into...
Yeah, we're getting in the weeds now. I mean, that's just crazy thought, but I was just thinking, like, what if
we haven't even
really
given our
was the
scores
case?
yet?
Yeah, we haven't talked about reviewing this thing.
Sorry, we're getting off on a tangent. That's completely my fault. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, this series laid so many seeds to explore that it's hard to not just go off on tangents.
It really is. It really is.
The possibilities are way open now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we'll refocus. We'll refocus. Okay. Let's get right into our thoughts, our overall thoughts. Ryan, why don't you start off first? What is your score, and what did you think of the season and season finale overall?
I'm going to give it about a 7 out of 10.
Okay.
For me, this had a lot of flaws, but that's just kind of overshadowed by the fact that it was just so enjoyable. Like, if other things were as flawed as this, I'd give it a much lower score, but this was just, like, really just addicting to me. Basically, as a comic book fan, waiting to see Kang and waiting to see if it was Kang was a long week. It was actually a long 2 weeks, because episode 4... I was hoping episode 5 would have some answers, and this past week has been hell. I'll tell you, for those who don't know, I'm going to go off on a tangent here. I apologize in advance, guys, but for those who don't know, my life changed when I was 14 years old, and I watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, a show by Joss Whedon, who sadly has run into some troubles lately, but his effect on my life remains the same. And I watched an episode called Buffy the Vampire Slayer, a rerun on TV called Surprise. So if there's any huge Buffy files out there, they know episode 25, the 13th episode of season 2, Surprise, and it has a cliffhanger ending. And I remember watching that, and the next episode, it was a rerun, but it aired regularly on Saturday nights. And I remember that week being so long for me. And later finding out that the original airing of the show had been transitioning from, like, say, Tuesdays to Wednesdays, and they had chosen that pair of episodes to just air 2 days in a row. And I always thought it's because it was just totally inhumane for them to make anyone wait a week. And I feel like I was the only person, because I watched it later, had to wait that week. It's the longest week of my life, and I have not felt that way again until now. And this was the longest week, and it was just oh my gosh, I was sweating it out the whole time. And when it finally came to watch the episode at 2 a.m., I immediately just scanned ahead until I saw Jonathan Majors' face on the little screen within the screen, and just flipped and saw 2 seconds of him, and then I was like, is that him? I don't know. So I clicked ahead to the end credits and saw his name, and then I went back and watched the whole episode because I wasn't going to wait at all to see if it was him. So in that regard, it's very addicting, very entertaining. So
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and give it a 7 out of 10.
And I think that's one of the great things about what Disney's doing now. It's opposite of Netflix, because now Netflix has gotten to the whole just binge it and it's done. But then you kind of feel like, okay, I watched it for like a day or two and now it's over. Whereas this makes you wait like the old days, like back when we were kids.
Yeah.
You have to wait to see what happens. I didn't realize how much I missed that until Disney started doing it again. So, James, go ahead. What do you think of the show overall in the season finale, and the reveal that it is essentially Kang, a version of him, and just what did you think of the season overall?
I'm going to give the season a 9 out of 10.
Nice.
I thought this one really sort of blew the whole concept of these series out of the water in a way that, like, as much as I loved WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, by the end of it, they felt like they were really just holdovers until actual movies came out. Like they were not meant to be self-contained stories. They are self-contained stories, but like the purpose of them is to get to the film. Whereas to me, this felt more like its own sort of story, but it's also like a story that has enough lingering questions and enough sort of lingering threads to feed both the film series, but also because we know there's not going to be a Loki film, whereas with Captain America, we know there's going to be one. We knew Wanda was going to be in Doctor Strange. This one, it's still got to tell Loki's story within itself, because we don't know if he's going to be in Love and Thunder. Because as far as those characters know, Loki's dead.
Yeah,
but I really appreciate that this told that story within itself. I'm a sucker for a redemption story, and Loki's never been my favorite character. I thought he was kind of overhyped within the Marvel Universe, but this one really made me like Loki a lot as he sort of like changed as a person and came to grow as an individual. And like by the end of it, his entire thing in the entire time has been seeking his own personal glory, whereas now he's so deep in the weeds that he only wants to stop the TVA. He doesn't care about that. Like, Kang offers him his throne and everything he ever wanted, to defeat the Avengers, to destroy everything that has ever stood in his
why
way.
He did that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it makes you wonder why he did that. If he was already planning, was he just like testing them? If he was already planning to hand the reins over for the TVA?
I think he's bored. He's been there in that castle for millennia, and he's playing with them because he's bored. I think he already knew how this thing was going to go. Yeah. That Loki was going to reject him, and then he even says at one point, like, they crossed the threshold into the point where he didn't know what was going to happen after that. But he basically knew that Loki was going to reject him. So I think he's just playing with them. They're just toys to him, which is why he's a little chewing the scenery at moments in the scene, and I love it, because as much as I hate that kind of acting sometimes, when you get the right character, it's so much fun. Oh, yeah. But like in terms of the actual story, I loved a lot of the questions it posed. I loved the entire concept of an agency sort of like outside of time, manipulating time, and the whole mystery behind that. And then like we kind of saw it coming that it wasn't what they said it was, but I really, really love things like the design aesthetic, the whole 70s, 60s sort of vintage bureaucratic sort of office with like all this old vintage technology and old sort of style building construction, and like just it was just so well done. And then when we later move on and we find Kid Loki's bunker, and then all of the Easter eggs in episode 5 were just so much fun. Like, I could explore that entire episode by itself. I could spend an hour talking about the Polybius machine, which, if you don't know the rabbit hole of that story, that's fascinating. I don't know what it means within the realm of Loki, but like I could sit here and tell you about it, but we chew up an entire 2 hours on it. The whole DB Cooper thing I absolutely loved, because again, I'm really into those like bizarre mysteries sort of thing, because it's an actual event. It actually happened. DB Cooper was a guy, but we don't know who he was. And I love when movies kind of play with that idea that, oh, he was that guy all along. The ship from the Philadelphia experiment just suddenly showing up was it blew my mind, because if you know that story where they were trying to create a cloaking device in World War II and accidentally transported a ship to the middle of Virginia, and then all of the sailors got fused to the walls of the ship. That's a whole mind
You're
fuck.
a fan of you're a fan of these movies playing with historical mysteries. And
Yeah.
so like you like the X-Men first, I think it was X-Men Days of Future Past, where they say Magneto curved the bullet, the magic bullet, and the Kennedy
That one was a
assassin.
little too on the nose, but I still did enjoy that a little bit.
Yeah. Stuff like that.
I thought Loki handled it a little bit better, where they're playing with these things, but like with the exception of DB Cooper, they're not so on the nose about it. And like there's all kinds of like comic book Easter eggs in episode 5 too, which was lots of fun. You had Frog Thor, which was all kinds of fun. Which if you don't know that story, look
Like
that
this-
up, because that's whole
I would
thing.
say out of
Chris
all
Hemsworth
of,
was-
what'd you say?
Chris Hemsworth was the voice of the frog. He like.
Well, they just took a couple of his lines from another film,
Oh,
and some of the sounds of him falling in Avengers,
mhm.
and just dubbed those in. Then you had Thanos helicopter, which I never thought I'd see in a
It's true.
Marvel production, because why would you put that in there? But there it was, in the way that you would put it in this, like just in the background, and it's like, oh, there's that thing I know, and then it's gone, and we don't have to talk about it anymore, and it's just a fun little moment. And like there was even more fascinating stuff, like Yellow Jacket's head or helmet, which is raising some questions with fans, because we know this leads back into Ant-Man somehow. The Living Tribunal's head, which that's a whole like so many different things that they layered into this that were so much fun, so fascinating. And of course, you know, the variant Lokis were all kinds of fun, with alligator Loki, because that's a thing apparently. And like one of my favorites about this, especially this last episode, was if you look at Kang's castle, it had all these like cracks with gold in them, which is it's a reference to this Japanese style of pot repair, where when you break a pot, you fuse it back together with gold, and it's no longer the pot that it was. It's now become a new thing, and there's this whole like fascinating Japanese philosophy about you're not really sad over the pot being gone, but like the two things together become a new thing. And I love the idea of like this guy's been here so long that like there's cracks in like the facade of this castle and everything, and just so many little things that they put in.
That.
Oh yeah, no, it's a fascinating track, like actual discipline that has like forethought put into it. And that's what I loved about Loki, is that like all these little things that they're putting in there have all this little thought put into it, but also it's a good story with good characters. Like fans were just going gaga over Loki and Sylvie and their relationship, and questioning whether or not it's incestuous, but they're not the exact same person, so we won't go there. But like it just poses so many fascinating questions, even before we get to the fracturing of the timeline into the multiverse, where now we have all these new questions of where we're going to go after this. And just, this series made me so excited and made me so happy. The only reason I'm not giving it a perfect score is because he didn't get his fucking jet ski.
Talking about Mobius.
Wait for season 2.
Right. Well, we're still.
I want
in
his
long
resolution
game here. He may still get that jet ski. You never know.
Yeah.
But
and I want to know who he is.
Over yet.
I want to know who he is.
So for me, going into this show, I think I need.
What if he's Owen Wilson?
If you guys remember, I wasn't. Some people may not know online. I wasn't as excited for this as most people were. For some reason, just the trailers didn't really do it for me. And I love Loki. I love Tom Hiddleston as Loki. I wasn't as pumped for it as it was for like WandaVision or Falcon and Winter Soldier or Black Widow. It was like at the bottom of the list. But it's still, after watching the show, I will say it's still my third favorite of the show so far. But it still delivered a lot. And actually, I've been rewatching it in preparation for this review. I didn't get all the way finished. I'm still like in the fourth episode or something like that. Just, doing that while working on other stuff. But I found myself still really enjoying it. So many Easter eggs with the show, more so than any of the previous shows that we've had so far, that were really kind of for those nerdy geeks, like Ryan, James, and myself. And so that to me is kind of like a love story for Loki fans, or like just Marvel fans, multiverse fans, and it definitely cracks open the possibilities moving forward. I mean, if, you saw in the ending shot there, where there's so many branches now, the possibilities are endless, and we will definitely see that moving forward. I'm gonna probably give this movie an 8.5 out of 10. I still really enjoyed it. It was a pleasant surprise for me, and from start to finish, it had some really great weight to it. I feel like the most important thing, while everyone thinks like Sylvie and Jonathan Masters playing Kang was like some of their highlights. For me, Tom Hiddleston finally getting some real, like, he always had character development back in the past, but this really fleshed him out as far as real development. I would say even more so than he got like in Ragnarok and Infinity War. Like, this Loki was, this is the Loki back from Avengers, and it really helped him see the error of his ways, kind of like the other one was, but this time he actually gets a real chance to do good again. And we don't know what's going to happen to him at the end, moving forward, but I loved the character study with him moving forward, kind of seeing other versions of himself, and even just get annoyed with himself. Like, there's this moment where it was one of the moments I loved is when he's in the grocery store trying to talk with this Loki variant that they've been hunting down, and he says this small line like, now I realize why Thor got so sick of me so much. Like, it's kind of like those realizations what kind of really did it for me. And the relationship between him and Sylvie was great. I thought their chemistry on screen was really well. What's the word I'm looking for?
Well done.
No, had a lot of great chemistry. The chemistry that was really well there. Either way, I can't think of the phrase. I'll come to me one day, sometime. But that was kind of the biggest moments for me. And of course, Owen Wilson, he's great. The chemistry between him, Tom Hiddleston, was the comedic relief was a lot better there, whereas the dramatic chemistry between him and Sylvie was better. So those are some of the biggest things for me. What about let's move forward now to some of the things we may have.
Turning back, I just wanted to mention that in terms of Loki's character development, one of the scenes that I think actually punctuated this very well, and I really wish I could put this in my notes earlier, but I only thought of it now, was the scene where he's watching what happens to him, because they pull him out of the timeline.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know what happens after that because now he's a variant. Which, again, if you haven't seen it and you're still with us, I don't know what you're doing, but the TVA pulls variants out of the timeline to make sure that the timeline stays straight and consistent. There's no variations. There's no tangents in the timeline. It's just one timeline, one series of events. And when something strays, they pull them out. This Loki in this series is a variant of the Avengers Loki, so he hasn't experienced any of the things that happen in Ragnarok. He doesn't see the end of Asgard. He doesn't see, everything that happens to his brother, the death of his father, the whole his own death. And there's a scene where they're playing out his film reel of everything that happens, and you're watching him grasp just the rest of his life. And that cemented so much for him, so much of his change, and so much of what is that was the turning point for his character. And it was so well done and just so well acted. Especially the moment where he watches himself die, and just like Hiddleston knocked that out of the park in a way that, obviously he's always going to do that, but like this was a real highlight. So I hope he gets some like nominations for this, because I think this is some of his best work. And it was just, it was a highlight, and it happened so early in the series that I almost completely forgot about it until you mentioned, just how good his performance has been, and just how much, his character changes. Like, I don't have enough good things to say about this. And of course, as you mentioned, I'm not a big fan of Owen Wilson, but Owen Wilson was so charming in this that when his character got dusted, and we didn't know that they went out to the thing, I thought he was dead. I almost cried, because I was actually despondent that they killed this character that was just so lovable.
Yeah, that was definitely one for me too. And I remember at first I was like, this is gonna be definitely a negative if they just kill him off, but of course he ends up in the void and whatnot. All right, now that we've kind of got some of the things we liked out of the way, which we will revisit as we go on, but let's get into some of the things real quick what we didn't necessarily like with the show. Now, Ryan's got a 7 out of 10, so there's probably a few things he didn't like, and he said there's a lot of things he didn't deliver on. One of the things
Ryan's the lowest of the bunch.
That's okay. We still love you, buddy. We still love you. But I'm actually going to start off here with one of the things I didn't like, and it's actually, I don't know if you guys may not have liked it or not, but for me, it's in regards to the season finale. There was so much growth with Sylvie throughout the show when she was by the time she was introduced. You almost would have thought she may have gotten, even though she was at this point, she waited her whole life for it. You saw her before she ended at the door. I waited my whole life for this. I hoped that she had grown past her rage. To even though she was still on that quest to stop him, all the way up to that point, when she finally got told what's all going to happen, she did not let her rage and her anger stop her from still killing him. I didn't like that. I didn't like the fact that it was like, it's going to sound bad, but that whole because she's a woman, she can't check her emotions and whatnot. I hope that's not the route they were taking with that. That's how I interpreted it. Maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But because she didn't, because Loki was trying to be very practical, very let's think about this. Where she didn't care. She wanted to kill him no matter what. That she had her mind set, and that was going to be that. Whereas I didn't necessarily like that because I thought she could have had a little more growth there. But then again, it does add drama between the two characters, which kind of ends in a little mini fight before everything happens. I just wish it would have been done differently. I don't know. What did you guys think of that scene? Am I wrong here? Am I kind of help me through this? 'Cause that's just how I felt as watching the season finale. In that last moment. Sorry, let me cut you off because I know you're about to say something, James. Like, it was almost like that moment where even after she kills him and she realizes, oh shit, I fucked up. It's like, well, why didn't you take the time to think about that? I don't know. James, sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, I think we have to take into consideration that we don't know a lot about Sylvie, which I think is something intentional because even with her sort of, we've already mentioned that all of these variants that they're plucking from the timeline happen because they make a choice that's different from what's supposed to happen. But we never understand why Sylvie was taken, and there's a lot of mystery in terms of why she was plucked from the timeline. So I think there's a very specific reason she was plucked, and it probably has something to do with this variant of Kang and his choices and whatnot. But I think that some of that mystery is intentional. I think that there's much of her story that we haven't gotten to yet. So I don't think they're quite done with her. I don't think that her journey is finished. So I don't think that this is the end that it appears to be.
Yeah. I'm sure she'll be in season 2.
She's also only ever had vengeance because she got plucked as a child and has spent her entire existence from childhood to this point trying to escape from the TVA, only ever trying to escape from the TVA and plotting her vengeance, trying to find ways to kill the TVA and whoever's in charge and whoever is responsible for pulling her out of it. So I don't blame her for being so, like, if that's the only thing that is driving you to exist, then I don't think that you're going to turn down that opportunity when it's in front of you, regardless of how reckless it is. She's clearly completely devoted to this concept, for good or for ill. I don't think it was a good choice of hers, but I do think that it was an intentional choice by the writers, that she makes this choice and now has to live with the consequences of this choice. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing in terms of like poor writing. I just think it's something that we don't have a full understanding of yet. I may be giving them too much credit in sort of a Lost way, where it's like when you watch Lost, it was like a lot of mystery and a lot of things that they didn't tell us, and it was like there was always this hope of, well, they'll answer that question. Or like Game of Thrones, where like everyone kept waiting for, well, the finale is going to be great, the ending is going to be good. So all of this bad stuff, all of our favorite characters are going through, and all these people we watch die. There's a reason for all of this, and then we get to the end, and it's like. So maybe it may not be anything. They may not actually have an answer, but I have a feeling that like there's a purpose to all of this, and I think that I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that even though I don't like the way she chose to do this, I understand why she chose to do this, and I'm curious enough to stick with it to see what the consequences are, and I really want to know more about her backstory. Because I think that's going to give a lot more context to her and what's going on.
Yeah, and that may give more context, right? And it wasn't just her vengeance, and she was just going to do it no matter what. There was so much development between her and Loki, like good development. Like you thought they were actually going to do something together.
Yeah, we thought they were going to do something together.
But she literally just threw it away, and that was the part. Like it was almost like it was nothing to her. But
because it's also the way it has to end.
Go ahead.
They had to end it like that way. They had to die, and they had to splinter the timeline. That's kind of the whole point of.
I guess, but I wish there was I wish it had done a different way, because there's so much development between the two, and then now she just threw it all away.
And that'll lead into season 2. So that's why that for me it all seemed to come to a little bit of an abrupt ending, but it's only the first season, and this is a multi-season storyline that they're going for. So
to me, this is the same quandary as Back to the Future, where everyone asks why the parents don't remember meeting Marty and that they named their kid after. And I keep telling people, do you remember the guy you met 30 years ago over one weekend? For Sylvie, she only knows Loki for a week, maybe, where she's lived with this for 20 odd years, 30 years. We don't know how old she is, maybe millennia. We don't know how long she's been stuck in the timeline or in that loop. So, like, as much as I enjoy their relationship, I don't think it's nearly as much of it's not nearly as impactful on her as we hope it would be, just because of how long she's had to live with only having vengeance and only having that. Whereas Loki, as much as he is, a god of chaos and an agent of vengeance and constantly seeking power and whatnot, he's had interpersonal relationships, he's had family, he's had friends, and he has a lot more sort of experience, I guess, with that, and can kind of pull from that experience when these new relationships pop up to kind of give context to things. Like, I'm not explaining it very well, but I feel like because he's had those interpersonal relationships over time, he's a little more open to the meaning and impact of those things, where for her this is new and it's a distraction from what she's trying to do. Again, I'm not saying that's necessarily good writing. We'll see what the consequences are, but I do think that that moment was earned in some sense based on her character development and how they've written her thus far.
Right. The other one for me, the other thing I really didn't necessarily care like, or how it was done, I kind of felt like they dropped the ball a little bit on, not dropped the ball, missed minutes. Like they didn't fully explain, like obviously she had to have been created by He Who Remains, but I felt like they were hinting at way more to her than that. And so hopefully there'll be more fleshed out for season 2. We don't know. I just felt like they were hinting at more than what was actually there. But that was something small for me.
I did hope that there would be some resolution to that, and Ravonna, who they've built up as an important character, and they didn't answer those questions, although they laid the seed at the very end here with the agents going back to the school and seeing Ravonna, her regular timeline version before the splintering happened. So I have questions about who Ravonna is, why she's plucked from the timeline, what her role is, and all this, because she knows more than she's letting on, but she doesn't know everything. And while I'm kind of disappointed that they left that to season 2, my disappointment was more on the was more driven by the fact that going into episode 6, I didn't know there was going to be a season 2. So when they start laying those seeds of like, what was Miss Minutes giving to Ravonna on the little telepad thing?
Yeah.
What was with that whole scene where they go to the school and they don't resolve that? Yeah. I still don't have an answer for what for Sylvie's event was. What happened to all of the other Loki variants? And of course, there's one question that you alluded to in your questions about at the very end when the timelines have branched and suddenly they go back and the one agent and Mobius don't recognize Loki. They just think he's a analyst. And I actually do have an answer for that, in that I think that what happened is the Kang that they were establishing as the big threat, that the Kang in the castle, for lack of a better term, the man at the end of time, was building up as his big threat, and why he extinguished all of the other branches was because this guy was such a big threat, or versions of him, multiple versions of him, are such a big threat that they needed to be extinguished. I think one of them has survived, many of them, maybe many of them, we don't know. and went back to some point earlier in the timeline to create its own branch. And now Loki's stuck on that branch, which actually raises another question of mine. If Loki's stuck on that branch, where does that lead? My new theory, season 2, Loki jumping from timeline to timeline. Are we going to get an MCU version of Quantum Leap?
Or like multiverse, like jumping from universe to universe?
Yeah, universe to universe, but like it.
Yeah.
They love to do these throwbacks to other things all the time, and like I don't know about you guys, but Quantum Leap was a huge part of, the zeitgeist when I was a kid growing up, and
right.
Like the possibilities of a multi-universes, or another one later on with Sliders, where they're jumping from universe to universe, trying to find their way home. Is that where they're going with Loki? Is he trapped in another timeline? Is he going to stay in that timeline, or is he going to move between them?
Right.
Because clearly this is not the same timeline we were in, whether that's because the major timeline has been changed or because he's stuck in a different branch.
And that's yeah. We'll get to that question because it's kind of more of a bigger question than the one part you gave. But Ryan, you had the lower score of us. What were some of the things that really stood out to you that you didn't necessarily work for you?
Well, I thought the structure was a little strange in that this reminded me of the biggest, maybe the only flaw in The Godfather. You guys know how I feel about The Godfather, and there's
me too.
We know you hate it.
Yeah. In the entire movie, there's really only one thing that's always really bugged me, like flaw-wise, and that's, there's, I guess, spoiler alert, but it's really not much of a spoiler if you haven't seen The Godfather. First of all, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah, really.
Where he says, Italia's a pimp. He never could have outfought Santino. But I didn't realize until this day, it was Barzini all along. It wasn't Talia, it was Barzini. So it wasn't one nameless, faceless bad guy who's undeveloped. It's another nameless, faceless, undeveloped bad guy. And it doesn't really matter. It's just, okay, so it wasn't one guy, it was the other guy. It doesn't really make any difference to us. In this, it's like, well, we're told this organization, the TVA, was created by these mysterious beings who created it because there was a multiversal war. And they give all this backstory. And they say that the timekeepers did this, and then they say, and they finally meet the timekeepers for 5 seconds. And say, it wasn't them; it was someone else. And it's like, of course, as a comic book fan, I was really psyched because it was going to turn out to be Kang. But from an objective point of view, it's sort of just like, so it's not these one nameless, faceless guy. It's some other guy we haven't met yet. So what difference does it make if it's not these guys and it's going to be some other guy? We're going to still meet that guy.
We do spend 20 minutes with him, just chewing the scenery and him explaining everything. So he's not quite as faceless as, the 3 seconds we get of these robots.
Yeah.
He's not faceless in the end, but he's faceless at that point. So it doesn't make any difference at that point if it turns out to be them or someone else. Either way, at that point, there's an unrevealed bad guy that it turns out to not, the twist is it turns out to not be these one guys, but it turns out but just some other guy that we also haven't met yet. It doesn't really make any difference in the end. And then what really bugged me is they finally go. They're like, fine, we're gonna kill this motherfucker. And they go to the end of time. That's
how they said it too.
And he explains, on Disney Plus. And he explains the exact same backstory to them. The exact same story they heard in the end. The only difference between the story at the very beginning of the series and the story at the end is he's talking about himself instead of 3 lizards.
Now,
and then Loki's like, wait a minute, we shouldn't kill him. And I'm like, Loki, he just told you the exact same story you heard at the beginning of this.
But no. The difference is that Loki's had growth. When Loki wanted to kill them before, it was because they were plucking from the timeline and punishing him. He now understands the consequences of not just his actions, but the actions of killing this guy and everything that would unravel. And even if he's not telling the truth, because we can't trust this guy who just suddenly showed up in a black onyx castle in the middle of the fucking galaxy somewhere we don't know. We don't know the consequences of killing this guy. Let's think this through a little bit. And I don't disagree with him. I also don't think that I don't know about you guys, but I thought the mystery of, well, it's not these guys, it's someone else, made it more interesting, made it more fun to watch, because I wanted to see the answer of who is behind this and why are all these secrets, being kept, and what is the actual story. I don't think that the story is exactly the same. I think that the motivations were different, and I think that yes, he created the TVA to cause one timeline to stop catastrophe, but like I don't know, it worked for me, and I think that there's a lot of interesting ground that it covered and will cover in the future.
Yeah, and on top of that, for me, I guess the structure of that aspect, I mean, I can understand why it didn't actually work for you, but it worked for me just because I associated it because it's basically the same structure as Wizard of Oz, as far as Oz himself. You know, he created this facade, he created this thing to help hide what's really going on, you know, to hide who's really behind the curtain. And I just, that's how I kind of associated with it. Now, real Oz is just a regular, well, I guess, yeah, it actually is the same, because this version of Kang, he said himself, I'm just a regular human being guy, whereas like someone like Kang the Conqueror, he enhanced himself with, you know, future tech. That's why he made himself so so powerful. And even like Kang Prime, but that's a whole other thing. So this version of Kang, or you know, whatever, he was just a regular human being. So that's how I kind of associated it and what they used it from, sort of thing. But Brian,
there's also the fact that the reveal of the timekeepers wasn't just a twist for us. It was a twist for a lot of characters and became a turning point for their storylines. Not just Ravonna, who clearly knew something was up, but wasn't getting into it. Not just Sylvie, but like all of the timekeepers learning that they were variants, learning that they'd been lied to the entire time, and now they're branching off into another storyline where they're trying to figure out what the hell's going on. So I don't think that was sort of a double take or like a red herring kind of, like I think it was a really good writing choice, because now it's set up a very different path. It's a turning point, and I liked it. I like the mystery of what's actually behind it and the man behind the curtain. And I love Wizard of Oz, so the illusion worked for me very well. The visuals worked for me very well, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's
that's like my main flaw. That's why it's a 7 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, that's fair. Any other small things that you may have thought like that kind of may have bugged you a little bit in there?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Well, let's then move forward here, and I'm sure as we talk about these questions I have set up for you guys moving forward in the MCU and the ramifications of now that there's so many, that the multiverse is here, there's a lot of things that we can speculate on moving forward, and also things that could have been different. There's some questions here I got here. So moving it to you guys, and whoever wants to jump in first, they can. Did you like that Kang took over essentially the character of He Who Remains? And even if you did or didn't, wouldn't it have been better to make it an actual version of Kang from the comics, kind of like Immortus, you know, that version of Kang? Or do you think it was just fine that because He Who Remains is not Kang in the comic books, it's someone else completely. Now, do you think that was a good move on their part, just to kind of do something different? Or could they have actually used someone like Immortus to help with that lore a little bit?
I actually really liked it because one of the issues going into this, when everyone was surmising that this would be Kang, is that we almost want the story with Kang to be its own story. And if you're setting up too much in these TV series, the people who miss out on these TV series are going to be too confused when it comes to this other stuff. I think that there should be enough sort of self-contained within these stories. So like, I'm having trouble like verbalizing what I'm trying to say. I like that this Kang is not the Kang we're going to be getting later.
Yeah.
But it still sets up enough that the people who do watch it are benefited by watching later. The people who watch just Ant-Man and the Wasp 3 will get a different version of Kang, will be introduced to this Kang because we don't know anything about him yet. So I like that there's many versions of Kang. And honestly, I don't know why it can't be like a retcon that this version of Kang has always been the man at the end of time, or whatever. I can't remember his name at the now. Yeah, He Who Remains.
Yeah.
Because again, we've already established in comics that there's so many versions of Kang out there. Like you've established previously, Immortus, and Kang shows up in different periods, and he was a pharaoh at some point. We also know that Iron Lad at some point was a version of Kang, whether it's the Kang that we know or not. I'm fine with there being different versions of Kang because of the sort of impetus of his character being someone who travels between time and now dimensions as well.
Yeah.
And because he is. I like the idea of him being the one who saw the consequences of there being so many versions of him and pruned the timeline. I think it makes the most sense in terms of who you would bring in to this, minus someone maybe like a version of Apocalypse or something. But again, we haven't brought up mutants yet, so that wouldn't make any sense. However, we'll get there, maybe, hopefully. We don't know.
This even, like, I didn't even think this, just like Fantastic Four, my prediction now is that in the timeline that Kang created, he didn't want mutants within his timeline.
Yeah.
So now if there's a multiverse, mutants can exist.
God, I hope not. You guys know, I hope not only Fantastic Four, you guys know how I feel about that. But
Yeah.
That X-Men, I hope they don't use, and they're probably gonna. But I'm really hoping they don't just go X-Men and Fantastic Four from another universe. No, it'd be nice to go and travel to other universes and have that kind of fun and cross over with other things. But I would like the FF and the X-Men and all that stuff to still just be in the one main timeline and still.
But they will be. But the question is, how do you incorporate them into a timeline that's already pre-established without mutants? When part of the impetus of the X-Men, especially when you've got two leaders who, one of them comes from World War II. How do you have that 75-year history without there being any mutants? You have to answer that question somehow. So either everybody's forgotten about mutants somehow, no one's talking about mutants, which would be weird, especially when we're in a world with superpowers. Why are there not mutants already, sort of pre-established and whatnot? They spent all this time establishing the Inhumans as a sort of version of mutants, and have almost completely retconned that because none of the TV shows prior to Disney Plus matter anymore, apparently.
Right.
There has to be something that they do to bring in mutants, because they're going to at some point. The X-Men characters are just too interesting and too popular to not bring in. But they have to do something to bring them in, and not just suddenly they appear with no explanation, no rhyme or reason why they haven't existed yet.
And they could easily do kind of what DC did with their multiverse when they, kind of made them into one. They could do like with this multiverse established.
Oh god.
Yeah, Crisis. They could do a version of Crisis where hang on. Like, so in the Fantastics version in their timeline, they are the first family, and in the Mutants timeline, they are the establishing. And then when they try and when all this finally comes to an end, and they bring it back to one timeline, they. The mutants are brought in, Fantastic Four is brought in, to this one timeline, and because they probably helped defeat Kang and whatnot, and then from there, and that could be the case.
That's what the third, whatever Secret Wars was a melding of universes, because Marvel had too many of them at that point. It was basically Marvel's Crisis, but it was a way to incorporate characters like Miles Morales into the main timeline, because they wanted to eschew the entire Ultimate timeline, but keep certain characters who were already interesting, like the evil version of Reed Richards, who was already like a very fascinating villain, and of course Miles Morales, who's insanely popular. We have to get to that point somehow, and one of my questions about, as soon as we started talking about timelines, was, are we going to get a Secret War, or is the flashback to what happened with the original timeline, where he pruned it to one timeline, was that actually Secret War, the original Secret War, and now we're going to get another Secret War, because like they haven't announced it yet, but we know that there's projects that they have on the slate that they haven't talked about, and this opens the door to something like Secret War. And as much as Secret War is one of those things where it's like, nah, they'll never do that, Marvel's proven time and time again that they're willing to do the thing that no one would ever think that they would do.
Yep. Well, so the Russo brothers have openly stated, we'd love to do Civil War. We can come back and do Civil War. Let's do it.
Yeah. They've even said like they would. The only reason they would come back is to do Secret War. So if they really want to bring them back, that'd be the way to do it.
And that begs the question to me then: is Kang the Beyonder
a version, like he'd be
is one of them a version like the Beyonder, where he's reached sort of a cosmic level of power, and maybe that's why this version of Kang was fighting against them, was because someone like the Beyonder existed and could just pull apart timelines and put everybody onto one planet to fight each other for his own stupid entertainment. And then like that's why I love this series, is because it begs so many questions and just so many possibilities, even beyond the very obvious ones where what's going to happen in Doctor Strange and No Way Home and
all those.
Yeah.
Now,
so
the next question I have for you guys, now I realize it's more of a prediction for myself, and you guys can chime in if you want, because you guys know the question. But for everybody listening, you guys want to jump in the comments and what you think. So we're on the topic of mutants, which made me think of Wanda. Now, and we're going back to WandaVision. We're taking a trip back in January. At the time when she heard her children screaming her name, we all thought maybe they were just stuck in a dimension within that timeline. But now, could this be like a Loki essentially taking place before that, whereas now she's actually hearing her kids across multiverses?
I think it's already been
and that's why she goes to Doctor Strange to help her find her children within a different multiverse.
I think it was already established that this takes place before WandaVision.
Because technically the TVA
from 2012.
Yeah.
And
no, but I think
within time, so
I think what I'm trying to say is that within sort of like the watching pattern, even though this comes out afterwards, it's supposed to be chronologically, which how do you do that with the story out of time? But chronologically, story-wise, it's supposed to be set before WandaVision. For whatever reason, they waited until now, probably because they didn't want to spill the beans on the multiverse before WandaVision, because that kind of makes what she was doing seem not nearly as exciting and weird, because we hadn't seen anything up to that point, but now we have all these branching timelines, and it's like, is this just another timeline or something? Like, so yeah, I do think that that's in terms of the kids. One thing I wanted to point out was at the very beginning of this episode, we heard as the Marvel logo was going, all kinds of different voices from not just the MCU, but the world. Like I don't know if I heard Carl Sagan in there at one point talking about time, but it sounded like maybe Carl Sagan. I don't know. But like, I think that they're trying to do something with that. I don't know what it is yet, but I have a feeling that ties into the kids' voices where I don't know what it is.
Right.
But it feels too similar to not be connected somehow to me. I don't have a theory for it, just sort of like, they end a series with these disembodied voices, and now we're starting a new series of disembodied voices. And are these like the voices of the time before? Is this like, are they trapped in a pocket? Are the kids trapped in a pocket dimension? Because I know in the comics at one point they're kidnapped by somebody and held hostage.
Mephisto.
Was it Mephisto? I thought it was somebody else.
Yeah, it was Mephisto.
Anyway, like, I don't have an answer for where they are.
Yeah.
But I do think that the disembodied voices is an important development, and I want to know what it means.
I still feel like it'll. The reason I brought up is I think it'll play a part in Doctor Strange 2.
Yeah.
And speaking of, like,
well, I mean that was her descent into madness in the comics, was the loss of her kids and the team sort of lying to her about a lot of stuff, and that's what happened. That's what led to Avengers Disassemble, and then eventually to No More Mutants and all that stuff.
Right.
So I in a story where Doctor Strange is trying to rein her power in, because she's now a very raw, like she has all this raw potential, all this raw power that is just sort of wild and uncontrolled and whatnot, and she's very clearly slipping into a dark place. I do think that the kids are going to factor, like this lost family is now going to factor into her madness as much as it did in the comics.
Right.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm going to throw this next question to you because it kind of goes in the same thing, because I recently saw something on the news and we haven't posted yet on real time, but we will. I was going to ask next, this is kind of, since we're on the topic of Doctor Strange 2, what do you think, where do you think Loki, what's going to happen with Loki now moving forward into season 2, but also just, we think we're going to see him in something in the future, because a report just came out from Collider that there's reporting that Tom Hiddleston's Loki will make an appearance in Doctor Strange 2. So Ryan, do you have any predictions of how you think, or where you think Loki's going to go now within this new version of TVA, or like, what we might see moving forward?
I mean, how much can you really predict at this point? It's going to be whatever they want it to be,
Well,
maybe we'll see him in Doctor Strange 2. Maybe we'll have to wait until Loki. It'll be what it is.
Yeah. Prior to that, my answer, prior to you telling me that, my answer was going to be, I don't think he's going to appear in anything, simply because they're clearly like continuing his storyline within this, but we also know that there's variants of him out there. They hinted heavily at with the old Loki played by Richard E. Grant, who we've barely mentioned, but oh my god, was he
so great.
Such a great role as this like old Loki. They established that old Loki survived Thanos by playing dead and making it very convincing that he was dead, to the point where even the Asgardians couldn't tell that he was dead, hid out on a planet, and the only reason that he got caught by the TVA was because he left the planet. So it's been my theory that it's possible that Loki still exists out there, that our Loki, the one we're familiar with, that survived Avengers and went all the way into Endgame, is still alive out there somewhere, could come back. And now that the TVA isn't, well, I mean, they're still there, but like, because like all this chaos is going on, he could leave that and still come back. We know that, you know, Thor Love and Thunder is coming out. What better place for him to come back than with his own brother? But if we're doing a multi-dimensional thing, and you know, there's going to be him in some sort of dimensional crisis, whatnot, it makes sense for him to show up where they're tackling that with the one character who could probably deal with it, Doctor Strange.
Yep.
But who knows? We don't know what's going on yet, and there's so many questions left to resolve in terms of what's going to happen now.
I think since I saw that news, because at first I wasn't sure how to answer this, because for me it was like either he may do a little cameo in Thor: Love and Thunder or like an appearance. If not, we'll just wait till season 2. But hearing that he may be in Doctor Strange 2, my prediction is that I would like to think that the Loki we see in Loki's show, he will show up there and be like, hey, basically giving Doctor Strange the heads up of, hey, what's, you know, kind of what's going on, essentially. Because in Doctor Strange's timeline, he doesn't have the time stone. And he only really sees, you know, within his reality. So kind of giving this the heads up, which then leads to the multiverse of madness kind of thing. That to me would be like kind of what happened, kind of how he did in the in the Thor Ragnarok, kind of how Doctor Strange had a small little cameo there. It would kind of be the opposite.
Yeah.
For Doctor Strange's movie. That's where I think how it will happen. Okay, so let's move on here to another question. I think if hopefully Ryan can chime in a little bit if he would like, and James, for you as well. How many? So we're wrapped back now to Kang. How many other versions do you think we will realistically actually see rather than Kang? Because we know for sure we're getting Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man and the Wasp. So we're kind of getting a little nerdy here. How many do you actually think we will realistically see moving forward in the MCU as far as different versions of Kang?
I mean,
realistically, I don't see Iron Lad making an appearance. Realistically,
well, we we know that there is some sort of Young Avengers team slowly building. They haven't announced any sort of Young Avengers, but they're putting together all of the different players involved. Iron Lad was very prominent. He was the reason why they came together to begin with. So I could see a version of Kang the Conqueror coming back post Quantumanium to bring together the Young Avengers, because one of the theories out there that I really like is that now that we're seeing the Countess Elaine from Seinfeld collecting all of these different variants of heroes that we know, that they're leading to some sort of Thunderbolts Dark Avengers.
Right.
And the theory that I've really enjoyed out there is that the Young Avengers will come together to fight the Dark Avengers, because they're just going to be like, it's going to be like a Suicide Squad situation where they're brought together for the greater good, but obviously there's nefarious intentions behind that, and they'll very clearly be the villains, just as they were in the comics. And someone is going to need to step up, but the Avengers are scattered. Several of them are dead. Some of them are missing in action. And I do think that could be a version of it. As I just said, you know, there could be a version of it where, you know, maybe the Beyonder was a version of him. There's all kinds of different characters that we haven't established yet. The possibilities are endless, but I also think that they're very much going to focus on specifically Kang the Conqueror as sort of the primary version of him. Just like the version that we got in Loki is, just a tease of that. But I think that he's going to be the major version.
Right.
And then anything else will be.
I think well, maybe we might see a few, but I mean, there's the possibilities are so endless about how many there are that eventually we'll have to see someone be King and Conqueror being like, I killed all the others.
Right.
Because otherwise it's just we waiting to see the next one. So it would be interesting to see one say, I am the last Kang. I killed all my counterparts. I think
either that or we get a spot where kind of a 10 little second where you see Kang the Conqueror travel through different multiverses and killing off. Like you'll see like Prime or, just different versions of himself.
I would like to see like what some sort of depiction of a flashback of like how he sort of conquered the timelines, and now that Kang has returned, the damage that he's causing, and maybe he's going out and killing other versions of him to not be competition because he doesn't want to lose like last time where the Man in the Castle version of him beat him.
Right. That's very well possibly, and I hope that we will see Kang we actually realize as Nathaniel Richards. I think that'd be really great to have the good version of him play a role as well. Not just Iron Lad, but actually have Nathaniel Richards play a role, come back in time, whatnot, to the 21st century, because he wasn't really around until the 31st century. But that would be really great to see. So I don't know. We'll see what versions we will see. I'm hoping it's more than just the two we got. You know what I mean? Because if we're really going multiversal, I would like to see different, because he's supposed to be the big overarching bad, kind of how Thanos was. So I would like to think we're going to see more than just 2 or 3. And we got to admit, guys, we haven't done it yet. I mean, Jonathan Masters put on one hell of a clinic in his performance. So much depth, especially at the end where he didn't even know what was going to happen next. I mean, talk about putting on a clinic as far as acting goes. That was really impressive. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah, he hit. Obviously Sylvie was great. Obviously,
of course.
Tom Hiddleston was outstanding. Richard E. Grant stole the show for his episode, but I don't think any of them sort of held a candle to Jonathan Majors, and just like he shows up and he's such a sort of odd character.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you peel back the curtain and you see the wizard for what he is, and it's like, are you really the guy? Are you really? And then like he's clearly not all there, but he's still so much fun to watch, and then he's explaining things, and there's like a slight sinister nature to him. And like he's not quite evil, but then like he's done some terrible things and he's okay with that. Right. And it's like, I don't know, there's just so many. I could gush about him for hours, and I think that I think it's a really fun way to introduce him, but I think it's actually going to be very interesting, because I think the version of King that we're going to get is going to be very, very different. And this was them. This is them letting him play with it and have fun with it before they get to like the real version of Kang that we're kind of waiting for, and just how sinister he's going to be. I mean, maybe he's not sinister. Maybe they'll play it exactly the same, because clearly this guy has some acting chops. I haven't seen him in anything before that I'm aware of, but like just watching him was most of the episode disappeared, and I'm like, oh my god, there's like 10 minutes left and we're still watching him chew the scenery.
Yeah, and he's been in, if you haven't seen Lovecraft Country on HBO Max, watch it. He is great in that show as well.
It just got a bunch of nominations today too.
Yep, so he was really good in that show. It's just, I really loved how his performance all went, especially like going from quirky to dramatic and kind of really weaving them in really well. I'm hoping as we get different versions of Kang, we're going to get different performances out of him. That's what I'm looking forward to the most. Now, Ryan, I'm hoping you can elaborate for me here on this next one, because James did bring up that, at the end of the show, the Mobius and was it a B-15, a Hunter B-15, didn't know who he was. Now, this is obviously a brand new, different TVA. Ryan, do you think that the original TVA still exists? And if so, like, you think we'll see it in season 2?
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously those versions of those characters are going to still be around. I don't think they're going to throw away all that character development and all that.
Right.
All that storyline so far. So, yeah.
What about you, James? I mean, why do you, I mean,
the
reason I'm asking is because the TVA is supposed to be out of time. how is it a different TVA?
Well, that was my question. Was now that we've established that these people don't remember Loki, is it like they haven't established why that is yet, and clearly they're leaving a cliffhanger for us to like be tied in and get excited for season 2. Basically confirming season 2, because up until this point we didn't know there was going to be season 2. I do wonder if that timeline still exists out there, if this is still that timeline. Like, they haven't answered that question. Are these the same characters? Are we going to establish that these are different variants? Like, this is a different TVA, because clearly, like, they cut to a shot of Kang's statue, and not this version of the guy in the castle. Like, that was Kang the Conqueror's costume, not the other guy's outfit. And prior to this, the TVA had a mystery about who was involved, whereas this one clearly establishes he is in the TVA. They're putting up effigies of him in the TVA, so something dramatic has changed. Has he changed the timeline as we know it, or is this a branch timeline? The questions are endless, and I would like some answers. Obviously, like, they're setting up some things about what's going to happen in season 2. I hope it's not a lost situation where it's like, here's a mystery, you won't like the answer.
Yeah, I hope not either, and I hope that, I'm hoping they'll explore it more. It was left me scratching my head, because it's supposed to be out of time. How is there another TVA? Because there's only supposed to be one. Hopefully they give a good answers to that question.
Well, clearly, like, because it's so different, like, because Kang is there, he's clearly done something to change it. So
yeah, because you see the statue of Kang there, a version of Kang.
So it being out of time, I don't think necessarily protects it from being changed. Especially when you have someone who is such a master of time manipulation as Kang.
True.
So, like, there are questions. I would like some answers. We're not going to get them for a while, which is a bit of a bummer, but at the same time, that's how you write cliffhangers. You don't get all the answers.
True. Very true. And so I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, for especially some of our audience members maybe asking that question themselves. So, who knows? Hopefully they answer it. I don't really even have an answer to that, because I'm kind of scratching my head on that one. But now here's the big question for me that I've been kind of pondering in my head. So Sylvie kills Kang, or He Who Remains, right? Essentially, that area is completely at the end of time. So what do we think Sylvie's fate is now within the MCU? Like, do we think she's just going to be stuck there until season 2? Because that TemPad, if you realized, it kind of was like, it essentially turned off or something like that. Like, it's not working. That the one that He Who Remains had. So what do we think Sylvie's fate will be? And, what do you think will happen to her? Like, and also, do you think we'll see her again before Loki season 2? Kind of how it's been reported that Loki will now be in Doctor Strange 2. I mean, what do you bounce some predictions off of me, guys? 'Cause I'm kind of stumped myself.
I definitely don't think we'll see her before Loki season 2, but obviously Loki, I think he's going to be traveling from timeline to timeline trying to find her. I think that's what his storyline in season 2 is going to be. So
not just that, because they established that he wants to stop the TVA. Like, that was the entire purpose of him running to find Mobius, was to warn him that, like, he now has another purpose, not just finding Sylvie, but, like, to interfere with what's going on, not for his sake, but for the sake of all of existence.
And I think it was not just this. I think it wasn't to stop the TVA now, because he made it sound like we need to stop all these Kangs that are coming.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So clearly that's going to be part of his drive. Maybe finding Sylvie is another part of it. Again, are we going to get a sort of quantum leap situation where he's jumping from timeline to timeline trying to find things? Because clearly the little devices that they have can open doors to different paths. Does that still work in a multiverse as opposed to just the timeline that they're on?
Right.
But again, we have to establish whether or not this is the same timeline, whether he's on a different branch now. So many questions. I would really like some answers. I think if I had a complaint, it's that there was a little too much left unanswered, but I'm fine with that, because I want a season 2, and I want them to tease me and keep me guessing, sort of thing.
Because how I envision it is that she's kind of just stuck there, so she's just going to be hanging around in that castle.
Yeah, but I mean that's only like someone's only stuck somewhere until the writers decide that they want to get them out. Then they can just hand wave them a device to get her out of there that's always existed. They just have to establish it early in the season, then he can go find it, or she finds a way out of it because she's got that little wrist thing that he had, the little stone thing that.
Tempad, I think is what it still is.
Well, whatever. Well, like there's clearly some sort of power still there, some sort of magic or science or whatever that still exists within that realm. So, like, there's got to be a way for her to come back to it if they still want her to be part of it. And I think there's too many things that they haven't answered about her to just leave her out from now on. Like, she's clearly got to be part of the story in season 2. How we get her back, to me, it's the same as the question about Grogu. Clearly, like at the end of season 2 of Mandalorian, Grogu goes off to the temple, and everyone's like, "Oh no, he's gonna die!" And it's like, no, he's clearly gonna come back because they're not gonna leave the biggest moneymaker they've had in 30 goddamn years, out of the show. So it's just a matter of time, and it's a matter of how.
Because Sylvia's easily become a fan favorite now. Hopefully still after this, because I feel like she pulled the Star-Lord Chris Pratt at Infinity War. You're just kind of mad at them, like, oh my god, you're so dumb for the choice you made. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people,
I think her motivations are a little more reasonable than Chris Pratt's than Star-Lord. Star-Lord's was just, it was, I mean, I guess they're both pure selfishness, but because again, I established that like, this has been her only reason for existence, and she's not going to like stray from that path when she hasn't strayed from it before. But now she has to live with the consequences of what that means, and I think that's going to be her story moving forward, and her character growth moving forward is that's something that when you see those vengeance storylines is there's always that question of, well, what happens after?
Right.
You kill the guy you've been trying to kill for years. What do you do now? You live the rest of your life. How? My only drive has been to kill this guy. He's dead. What do I do now?
Yeah, and that kind of had that realization in her face afterwards, what happened.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we'll see. My prediction is, I feel like she's just going to get stuck there. And now it's Loki. Loki's making his mission to find a way back. Because in my mind, this version of Kang created everything from the one timeline to the TVA that's out of time to even the void where everything that gets pruned goes. So in my mind, even the void that we knew is gone. That, there's a brand new void. So we'll see. I don't know. Now let's wrap in our last bit of thoughts, guys, because I think we've kind of harped on quite a few things already. We've done pretty well of kind of nerding out over this show and the future of the MCU, because this really is the big. I never thought we'd actually get a TV show that has more implications on the MCU overall than I thought it would just be a movie, but it's actually this TV show that's really has the most implications of everything moving forward. So I will give my last minute overall thoughts. If you guys, have had I would say reservations about certain things, maybe rewatch it. I definitely rewatched it. It's a fun time. I had a lot of fun with the characters, the progression of Tom Hiddleston's Loki, the introduction of all these other great characters. Owen Wilson's character Mobius is probably one of my new favorites, as far as just how cool he played it so well, and I think there's a lot of enjoyment there. I'm really excited for season 2. I honestly don't know when we're going to get it.
You didn't go too hard being Owen Wilson,
right? I don't know when we'll get season 2. I mean, hopefully it won't take too long. Hopefully they can just start greenlighting it and it'll be out like kind of how Stranger Things used to do, like comes out every year. I would like that because I really want to see this story progress, especially kind of progress rapidly since we have a multiverse that we're dealing with here. I can definitely say wholeheartedly I recommend this. I mean, if you watch this without watching it, I don't know why you would, but I would even recommend watching it again, because I even picked up on more things after rewatching it a second time that I didn't notice before. Mm-hmm. So those are my overall thoughts. Great show. It's still my third favorite. I would still put WandaVision as my number 1, Falcon and Winter Soldier is my number 2, and this is my number 3. But they're all three just equally great in their own ways. But Ryan, what are your last minute thoughts before we wrap up here?
Yeah, like I said, it's a really entertaining show, really addictive. You'll blow through it if you have the fortune to watch it without having to wait like the rest of us did.
Right.
And like I said, it's got some narrative flaws that I saw in it that things I still don't understand about it, but overall, it's a really good time. So,
James.
Yeah,
for us.
I mean, I've gushed over it we're like well into an hour into this review now. So
That's okay. I'll be the one
I've
editing it.
said so much about it. The only thing I have left to say is clearly we've done all these branching stories. Clearly we know that there's stories coming out that are going to be working off of that. My only remaining question is, where the hell's my No Way Home trailer? Give me my No Way Home trailer. This movie comes out in December. We're already in July.
Yeah.
We haven't seen anything from it. They've established there's the multiverse. We know there's going to be multiversal characters in this. Give me my trailer. I want to see the trailer. Where's my Spider-Man?
Oh, guys! Oh my God! The trailer just dropped on. Yeah.
No, it didn't. When does Venom come out?
Venom comes out the 4th of Who the Hell Cares?
Well, I'm thinking if are they waiting for that to release the trailer?
No, the fuck they're not. Come on.
It is a Sony film, and they based on the Morbius trailer. They're clearly trying to tie in aspects of the MCU because of Michael Keaton's appearance as
September 24th.
Adrian Toomes. So, like, it has connections, really now with the multiverse out there. Like, it is a possibility, but I said, like, give me my trailer. I want it. Give it to me. Give it to me.
Because it's already established that Marvel will not be at Comic-Con. I mean, maybe they'll still release trailers around that time, but they will not be at Comic-Con for reveals and whatnot. So who knows when we'll get it? Hopefully,
when's the Disney panel? Like,
huh?
not the Comic-Con Disney panel, but the with D23 or whatever they call it.
Yeah, it might be D23. That's true too.
Yes.
Well, I think that'll wrap it up for us, guys. And last one thing I have prediction for is what if. Sorry, I wrote this down. Before I used to think what if was just going to be a throw off, like, this could happen, this could happen. I actually think that now what if is actually a show. We're going to be exploring these different multiverses that we're only visiting them. We're not, that way we can actually visit them and never have to visit them again. But we're actually
like Marvel Zombies.
Like the Marvel Zombies, and just different stuff like that. So I actually think they're using this to explore those different parts of the multiverse that we won't otherwise explore outside of it, which I think that's my prediction. I think that would be really cool if that was actually the case. But that'll do us for today, guys. Sorry I had to get that out there. I wrote it down. I wanted to bring that up. Thank you very much for watching or listening, however you wanted to do this. This is a long episode, but I know people love listening to these types of discussions and exploring all different avenues of what could be the future. But more importantly, guys, what did you think of Loki Season 1? Leave your comments in the section below. Give us your positives, negatives, your predictions moving forward in the MCU, and your score out of 10. Also, if you like what you watched, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you receive more of our various content in the future. Again, that's all we have for today. Until next time, I'm Josh Williams.
I'm Ryan Murphy.
I'm James Sheridan.
And thank you for keeping it real.
With Real Time.
Good night.